gift to raise questions, raise questions. This is called champion. At some point in life, we all want to be a champion of our own lives as well as in the lives of others. Um, in order to be a champion, you got the boxing gloves here representing the fighter. You got the cognac here. Every now and then, we want to reach a level of relaxation. You got the wristwatch here represents time frame, fighting in life, standing up in life, being knocked down, standing up again in life. All that transpires over time. You got the cigar that represents success. The fedora represents class. You got the title belt back here, the true champion, winning something. And then eventually getting to a point where we want to relax, after, being champions of our lives, So, yeah, champion. This is one of my favorite pieces as well. And then he has the luxury life, some art here that's appreciative. Hourglass, man fixing his cuff links. Ring right here, that's his hands. Ring, cuff links. Yeah. This piece is called Officer White's Television. And most cases, when you hear about an officer-involved shooting, people are abrupt to come to the conclusion that, the officer's always at fault. And what I wanted to do was stand on the outside of the multitude, as I'm known to do, and just raise a question like, what goes through an officer's mind when he has been sent home early and sees himself on TV? I don't think he's always feeling accomplished. I think there are officers who are put in situations and they are regretful that the outcome resulted in the loss of a life of somebody who was, considered a minority. So, I stand on the outside of the box with this Officer White's Television. I mean, I won't buy into that all Caucasian officers or even Latino officers are out to kill, black folk, or niggas. I don't buy that. So yeah, I definitely wanted to speak to that situation. This piece I call Handicapped World. Generations of enablers, plural sense, generations of enablers. The outer face represents a male, the second face represents the woman, and the third smaller face represents the child. The man, the woman, and the child. And then you have the world. I think the world is handicapped, for a variety of reasons. It's to a point where we make excuses for greed, for folks to be greedy, get away with it. We make excuses for failure. We make excuses for people to be inactive. And as I could go on and on how we have become a society of enablers, people who violate the code of morality, and there's always an excuse as to why they done it. And even when when the culprit is accused, convicted, to some degree as leniency, so they don't feel the brunt of full responsibility, which in part is part of enabling. Because of who you are, I'm a lighten the blow. And that's the world we live in. Handicapped world, generations of enablers is what this piece is called. This piece has also accumulated some age. The name of this piece is called Sitting on an Empty Plate. And the moral message behind it is over here you have a rescue mission. People are in line waiting to get food. And what people fail to realize, a lot of the food when it comes to rescue missions and even churches, a lot of this food is donated. So a homeless person, a needy person, whoever, they can go from sitting on a full plate to sitting on an empty plate. So here you have nothing but bare cement block, and he's sitting on it, and he represents, sitting on an empty plate, and in essence, that's what's going on here. Um, no food to give out at the moment. So they represent at some point, people get familiar with certain locations that they can go and get food. They'll meet there religiously that day of the week, that time. But if the donations are cut out for churches and rescue missions, yeah, people can literally go from sitting on a full plate to sitting on an empty plate, which is the name of this piece. This piece is called Cave, Cave. And I call it that because nowadays, I mean, that's how I perceive churches. I mean, you stand on the outside, you see a representation of the cross, but what goes on the inside is unknown until you get caught up. You can also see that this cross is leaning. The church is losing its people. I mean, people would show up to make a deposit in hopes that, okay, if there is some deity, some God out there who is watching, perhaps he'll see this installment that I'm making and will render me a blessing of some kind. But a poll was taken not too long ago. A lot of people are starting to lose their faith um, in Christianity, to be specific. Islam too, but this poll seemed to generate a lot of its tension towards Christianity. So the cross is falling. And when people get to a point where there's nothing to believe in, then they become alpha and omega of their lives at all costs. Um, for me, I started raising questions, years ago. And for me to line my life up with, the Bible, um, living it and becoming the scriptures in the sense that, let's say if the scripture said, Matthew 5th chapter, pray for those that despitefully use you. I had to be that. I couldn't be that guy who would go to another Christian brother and say, hey man, such and such is sorry, don't trust them, don't trust her, don't trust them. No, I kept it to myself and I prayed about it. I prayed for those that despitefully use me. So I had to become the scripture. When I look at the word scriptures, the base word is script. When you think about a script and you give a script to somebody, they have to become that script. So I didn't see scripture as something that you just quote. For me, scriptures was become that. And when I was lining my life up with the book and became righteous through Christ, not just believing it, not just confessing it, but lining my life up with it, abstaining from the sinful lifestyle that I used to engage in. Yet the people around me were dying in their shit. They were dying in their shit. And for me, I sought those spiritual gifts, courage to keep going out, sharing the word and being an example. And at some point, you raise the question like, man, why are the people that I'm praying for in the name of Christ, because I've lined my life up with this book, I'm living in his nature, why are they dying in their sin? Why are they dying in their shit? And then you have people say, well, you don't know their heart. No, from the abundance of the heart, the mouth speak. You also know a man's heart and mind based on their lifestyle. I know how these people were living. And what really frustrated me about it was that here I am living this life, and I look to see a reflection of my life from the book. Meaning, if Peter was righteous through Christ and his prayers were answered, I look for mine to be answered. So when I looked over in the book of Acts, 31st chapter, when it said that a jailer came to Paul and asked him, said, what do I need to do to be saved? That's what I'm looking for, and I'm living this. I've given up hip-hop, fornication, profanity. I'm fasting in society, not in jail, in society. I've lined my life up with it. Started getting into a little bit of Hebrew and Greek and going into the origins. So at some point, I started asking questions. And the truth is just what it is. It's ugly. Yeah, I learned a lot. Constantine, the whole nine. This is a bit of humor. This piece is called Harryology. Yeah, Harryology is what I call this piece. And it just basically said my ass would probably be in a straitjacket had it not been for my art. And you know, although I haven't done this piece, it's interesting. Yeah. And this is going out to the galleries, art galleries that I reached out to um, post pandemic and all that. And it was a few. I must admit, I haven't been aggressive or assertive in terms of pushing up on galleries, but the few that I did, um, this is what you get. And of course, you just saw this piece, and this is when I first done that, and I was so moved, like, damn, that got to be a big piece. I mean, I got to bring that to greater fruition. So yeah, it went from this to the piece that you just saw. And then you saw this initially on the Swallowed Up. Now she done took them clothes off, and I'm gonna also bring this to greater fruition. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know when the heck, because I write too. I got several books on Amazon. But people, a lot of people don't read. And so I figured I would, I paint pictures with words through my literature. So I figured I would tell a story now through my art, picture books. This piece is called While on His Way to School. And it symbolizes the African American boy walking to school, and this is what he sees. Um, a lot of parents, especially women, have a tendency to want to protect their children from everything at all costs. But the reality is, they were also that child who their parents and grandparents wanted to protect. So the overall objective is to equip your children. Um, you don't have to try to decipher who this man is, but establish the fact that it happens. You don't know what his story is. I did a documentary some years back called Shoes Without a Closet, and my objective was to get out there and live amongst the homeless people for a week. I gave up my normal life for a week. The only person that I really stayed in contact with was the videographer, the guy that would come to the location when I called him, if I come in contact with homeless people. And I wanted to speak for people who didn't have a voice. And one of the most angriest people that I come in contact with was a veteran. He definitely felt betrayed by not only the government, but he felt betrayed by U.S. citizens who looked at him as if he was to be at fault, And we get it. There have been some vets who engaged in drugs. Um, some, suffered from PTSD. Um, I mean, everybody have their story, but you just never know. And here's another piece that I don't want to know who this person is and why they're out there. I just know they are there. While on his way to school is the name of this piece. Here's another piece that has a bold message. It's called Girls Behind Open Windows. And, the words carry, significant strength. I mean, they are girls. See the uniform. So they're young in age. And they are behind walls, but the windows are open. They are engaged in a lifestyle and entangled in emotions that no more will they close these windows. I mean, these girls are doing what they do in their own space, but they project their love and intimacy through open windows. Girls behind open windows. Yeah, it speaks volumes. What sparked this is when I saw something. I saw this. This is not something that I conjured up. This is something that I saw. But even if I did conjure it up, I mean, this is the shit you see in society. I mean, I paint about stuff that I see and encounter in this world. Like I said, I do it based on conviction. And yeah, this is a piece that I'm proud of. Not because of the engagement, but to some degree, this is somewhat of a tug of war. These people are on the brink of freedom. Not just engaging as, okay, when I get older, I break out. No, they are young and they're engaging in this. It's like, we're not waiting for freedom later, you know? We're going to do what we do now because this is how we feel, you know? Heterosexuals do it. You've had girls run off to be with boys, 16, 17 years of age, heterosexual. So, in essence, these girls, like, we're not going to wait to get of age to do this. This is how I feel. And this is what we're about to do. This piece is called The Breakaway. And it, when you think about the Sankofa, a Kemetic Egyptian symbol of a bird, it's a picture of a bird, flying north, but looking over its shoulders to reflect on the past as it proceeds north forward. And here you have a guy here who is partial in color, partial black and white. The black and white, of course, represents the past. But he's living and functioning in today. And sometimes we have to break away from the people that we love, admire, respect, the day-to-day life, and engage in the past in order to gain that balance, that strength, to stay aware of the world that we live in. So this is called The Breakaway. He breaks away from this, today and dips in the past to gain strength involving his ancestors, Some of his ancestors, people paint this picture that all the ancestors were strong. There were ancestors who were weak, inferior, hateful, not just because of their conditions, but just woke up hating the people that they were around. What I've learned in life is that black folk, African Americans, whatever you refer to yourself as, they have this thing where they say, well, our ancestors this, our ancestors that. They were strong, they was courageous. If it wasn't for our ancestors this. I get it. Some of our ancestors, they passed on courage, strength, the will to be strategic as a means of rising above the situation. But some of our ancestors also passed on fear and inferiority. They didn't just pass on big lips, broad nose, and woolly hair. They also passed on their emotional makeup. And all ancestors, all slaves were not courageous people. And once I come to the conclusion of that, it allows me to see why you still have inferior black folk functioning the way that they do. Why? We didn't just pass on our outer makeup. We also pass on our internal being. Doctors say that when a woman is pregnant, whatever she's experienced, those feelings are passed on to the womb. So imagine on plantations, pregnant slave women also being prohibited from trying to learn. Well, that fear of learning is also going to be passed on to the womb. And there just be something about learning that may turn that child off later in life. And when I look at black folk today, it's like a lot of us do not read. I can't tell you how pissed I was when I heard black folk coming out of movie theaters. I saw Django. I saw the Harriet Tubman movie. I saw the Nat Turner movie. They were coming out of there excited as if they had been in history class. They don't read. They'd rather see it in a movie, in a picture. It's just something about a lot of things that took place on plantations still impact us today. Even this fear and this turnoff of reading, learning. I can't tell you how many debates I've been in because I read some shit that they didn't read, and because they hadn't read it, hadn't heard about it, and it's not popular to put on silver screen, I was depicted as, he's just conjuring up something. He's in the left field or the right field. Well, a lot of what took place on plantations impact us even today. Even when you look at how, and this is not a justification, but an explanation. I mean, just think about how on plantations, black male slaves were used to be, to breed what they call hands, children, to interact with other female slaves. It may take one male. He may be used to breed with three or four slave women. And after the birth of those children, he's resumed plantation. He was not pushed in a position to take care of them. He was used to breed. And who took care of those youth? Who made sure they had clothes? Slave master did. So this idea that black men running from responsibilities is something new. No, we've been doing this. Our beginning has a lot to do with what we're experiencing now. And I'm not even a pro-black individual. You'll learn that soon. But in regards to this piece, yeah, sometimes you have to break away from your people that you love to hang out with, and dip into, the past. A piece that has generated a lot of attention. There's been times when I've been at the park painting and just working on this piece, like people were like, damn. And here's another one of those past confronts presence. But the more message behind this is that I saw a lot of black folk putting their best outfits on and going down to the locations where they were protesting. And, nice sneakers, pro-black t-shirts, fashionable jeans, and taking pictures and posting them on social media. And what I saw, and based on the narrative that they were projecting, was, hey, I'm down here. We down here protesting. And the reality is that had somebody stepped on those shoes, it would have been a whole nother situation. So I saw a lot of hypocrisy in terms of this so-called Black Lives Matter and, the whole protest. People had on their best outfits. And this piece is called After the Protest. In the 60s, they were more genuine. They actually thought they were on to something. They actually thought that they were making a change. So after the protests in the 60s, they went to jail. These new millennial protesters, they went out to eat. Like my grandmother used to say, you ain't got to like it, but you got to deal with it. Yeah, this is the ugly truth. And that's what I saw. Best outfits, hanging out, putting the pictures on Facebook. Yeah, I was down here. I'm a part of change. And your whole mission for being down there was vain. It was vainglory. There's another piece that speaks volumes. This piece is called The First Black Business. And the reason I refer to it is people have to take in consideration that Europeans didn't always have the luxury to build slave ships. There's a term in LA, they say, well, wherever you get mad at, that's where you get down at. So when it came to imprisoning people and capitalizing on people, whoever you were closest to, that's who you put your hands on. But you had to first be dominant. You had to dominate those people. So you had African tribes enslaving other African tribes. And it was for capital gain. There was a benefit to that. Free labor. So the first black business, when I hear people in America, black folk, first black business, it really irks me because some of the people that they be saying is like first black, them be the first black to sell your ass out. You dig? So when I look at this piece, here you have normal life in Africa right here. Normal life here. Bathing, hanging out. Here you have normal life. This is everyday engagement right here. And then there's disruption. This is everyday life as well. But then there's disruption. You see a tango right here where an individual's dueling. This is dual combat right here. With individuals trying to apparently overtake this individual. Why? Here you have individuals being pursued right here. You have an individual pulling for this individual, and you got three over here pulling, kidnapping, quarreling right here. It's always, when I hear people talk about, white folk taught us to be, black, that's bullshit. Because way before the slave trade, tribes were going to war against other tribes. In the hip hop community, I learned about a group called the Shaka Zulu tribe, Africa Bambaataa. Shaka Zulu, actual general, You got the Zulu Nation. You think about the Mandinka, which is, we call them the Mandingo. These tribes were, throughout history, based on the recording, these were dominant tribes. So when we look at that, tribal war has always been common in Africa. There's always been black on black. Because wherever you get mad at, that's where you get on at. And anytime you want to deprive people of something so that you can eat, when your stomach growl, you got to put something on it at all costs. In Britain, Europe, you had the Slavs. Who were they being preyed on? By people that looked like them. So this whole notion that, white folk introduced us to slavery and they turned us, no, it's been black on black. And as the dueling continue, now you find people who are actually being pulled off, drug off, pushed off into slave docks, and eventually put on slave ships and making their way to the United States. And in cotton fields, we've been at war with one another. Like I said, all slaves were not strong individuals. You had some slaves that would tell. If you could learn a word, if you knew a word, you were told on. And it was just the everyday friction, You got to take consideration, like all Africans